Thank you, everybody, for joining today. We are Cannabis Lab, a group of educational group and networking group for professionals in the cannabis industry. My name is Amanda Barton. I am the president of the Broward chapter. I want to give a shout out to the Miami-Dade chapter leader, Eric Stevens, and his new bride, Suzette, on their recent marriage. So congratulations, guys. We'll start seeing Eric more. He's disappeared for his wedding. So big shout out to them. Congratulations. A few other announcements for you. The host of this event today is, we have a couple host sponsors, Mateo Communications and Graham Co. Thank you guys so much for sponsoring this event. We also, C-Lab also has some renewing sponsors, S2S Insurance. They are by far one of the leading insurance providers here in this space. They can offer all sorts of very alternative insurance solutions for your business. So please give them a call if you have any insurance needs. Also, a shout out to Move, one of the medical marijuana treatment centers here in the state of Florida, and Mr. Cannabis Law. On June 3rd, we have another event coming up. It's a virtual event at 420. We will be discussing labor and employment issues for operators. That event will be hosted by our sponsors, Blaze Staffing and Fisher Phillips Law Firm. So another great event to look out for. Labor and employment issues always plague small companies, especially here in this space. And also, it's a little far out, but mark your calendars. February 5th and 6th, C-Lab has the annual conference. We will be back in Wynwood at Manna Wynwood at the conference center. So look out for some more information on that. So why we're here today, we have a great panel for you. Today we will be discussing how brands and retailers can leverage technology to grow and sell their business. So we are really, really excited for this topic today. Our moderator is none other than Todd Rosales, who you know from Elevate Your Grind. He is definitely becoming the face of C-Lab. He had a great conversation yesterday with Michaela McLaughlin, the VP of Business Development at Springbrig. She is also on this panel today, but if you did not see that episode of Elevate Your Grind, please go back and watch it. It was amazing. But with that, Todd, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you so much for your time, everybody, and look forward to a great panel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amanda. She always does a phenomenal job getting these events going. And honestly, Amanda, I think you're gunning for my job with the way that you're introducing everything soon. You know, I might go on paternity leave and come back and not have a show. Folks, I really appreciate taking your time out of your day to spend with us today. I think we do have one of the best panels of the year so far for you today, especially if you're operating in the industry, because you're going to learn how you can, essentially what your options are around growing and scaling your business, right? You get into the cannabis space, you start your grow, you figure out what part of the supply chain you want to be on, but how do you go beyond your natural abilities, right? What is out there for you to be able to better organize, better reach clients, better run your business, and honestly automate a lot of the processes that eat up a lot of time of a startup and companies that are growing and scaling, right? We look around the industry and it's very easy to knock on the door of just one company and say, how many pieces of the supply chain do you have for me? But that's not always the best methodology in putting together technology for a business, right? We always want to look at, and especially in traditional industries that have a little bit more freedom and a lot less restrictions, how do we get the best piece of software for the supply chain that's going to integrate well with the other software that I'm working with? And I think the folks on this panel today are a very good example of companies that are working together to provide a massive amount of value to their clients, right? I'm honored to be on the panel here with Ryan and Jewel and Ivy and my colleague Michaela. Today, I'll be joining you not as a member of Springbig, but as the host of Elevate Your Grind. The technology panel was the last one that we did before we went into lockdown. And candidly, as much as I love my panelists on the last discussion, this one is going to be exponentially better. So with that being said, I'm going to pass the mic around virtually here. We're going to go Michaela, Ryan, Jewel, Ivy. Let's introduce yourself, a quick, who you are, what you do, and then we'll jump into the discussion. Michaela?
Hi, everybody. My name is Michaela McLaughlin. I'm the VP of Business Development at Springbig. Springbig helps dispensaries and cannabis brands reach their VIP loyal shoppers through digital communication and really compelling loyalty programs. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you guys so much for having the panel today.
Awesome. Thank you, Michaela. Ryan?
Hello, everyone. So I'm Ryan McQuillan. I'm the Director of Sales for Cova Software. We are the leading point of sale software for cannabis in North America. We have over 1,300 clients currently, and working on a bunch more that need to get live. So I'm happy to be joining everyone today. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Jewel?
Hi, I'm Loree. I am the Senior Product Manager at Headset. We're a data platform for the entire industry. So we provide tools for retailers to do business intelligence, as well as for brands to look at market forecasts.
Awesome. Ivy?
Thanks, Todd. My name's Ivy. I'm the Director of Sales here at Jane Technologies, and we're the leading e-commerce platform. So we help over 2,000 dispensaries and brands create website menus, review important data, and then manage their business online. Personally, I've been working in cannabis for past 8 years or so now, and just really pumped to be here with everyone. I think that we all see eye to eye as companies, and we're all trying to build better, more efficient access to cannabis.
Very cool. Well, again, I'm very glad that we have the panel and the panelists that we have today, because everybody here on this panel at some point in their career has had to roll up their sleeves and work alongside management teams for cannabis companies to figure out how they get to the next step, right? Whether that's, helping them organize through a CRM or a point of sale, whether it's a data integration or a big data play, that's what we do, right? So I'd like to start the discussion really just kind of looking across the markets in the US, right? We have so many different markets at varying ages of maturity. When we look at those markets, can we make assumptions about companies in each market based on the conversation and experience that you guys have had, i.e., hey, customers in California are more likely to buy off on technology to help them grow and scale because they have more money, they're more sophisticated, there's more competition, so they need an edge, versus a newer market like a Michigan or an Oklahoma, where a lot of companies might be focusing on putting their profits back into their grow and scaling and everything else. So I'll ask this as an open forum to the group, and whoever wants to speak first, go ahead. How would you kind of rank the markets from a generalization as far as maturity and acceptance of new technologies and new ideas versus those that are just trying to keep their head above water? I'd love to understand your views. Anybody want to go ahead and jump in on that one first?
Yeah, I could start.
Sure.
There's definitely different levels of sophistication from what we see, especially at Headset. We have a peek into the data and being able to see like what happens as a market matures. And there's definitely things that happen over time. Brands consolidate, prices start to drive down, usually after a market has been open for a couple of years, once supply stabilizes a little bit more. But I think especially in some bigger markets like California comes to mind, because there's so many actual CPG companies that are coming into play. So, especially in the beverage sector, I think we see a lot of those kind of traditional CPG companies bringing that kind of expertise into the market, and it makes it a lot more competitive. And in that sense, I think we've found that California is definitely easier to sell things into. But I think in these newer emerging markets, what we're seeing with MSOs coming in, bringing that level of sophistication to even newer markets, that I don't think it takes long for newer markets to catch up.
Very cool. Brian, Ivy, you guys, point of sale as well as e-com, I imagine those are very early on conversations in a lot of these markets. Is there a hesitation to adopt your platforms? Do people think they can do it on their own? Is it a need to have? And then to Jules' point too, you talk about these MSOs setting the trends. And Michaela, if you want to jump in on this too, are the MSOs setting the trends, or are the trends coming from somewhere in the middle of the pack and somebody who's trying to compete with the MSOs and everybody else replicating that? I'd really love to understand how those conversations are working and really the evolution of adoption, if you will?
Yeah. So for me, I think Jewel definitely made some good points. I think it's not necessarily an umbrella answer. If you look at markets like Oklahoma, the sophistication of the beginning of that kind of a market is nowhere near the level of what a Missouri has been out of the gate. So I think it depends on the regulations and what thresholds were there, how much money did you have in the bank, did you have to bring in operators from educated states outside? And when those things happen, like what happened in Missouri, you see you don't have to fight the battle of how important these pieces of technology are. They already understand it. Now I think there is a level of, do people even know that they need the POS? Yeah, absolutely. In new markets, when you're looking at places like Mississippi coming up, or Oklahoma, where every little dollar counts, there are people in those markets that go, okay, let me look at metric. Can I hand enter into this and just use some $89 square point of sale and get away with it? And it's sad how many people think that they can. But I think the more as the industry goes on, you ask the question about the MSOs, it's starting to be a huge piece of the puzzle. And I think their level of sophistication is definitely bringing the bottom of the pack up. And, when you're competing against a GTI, a Cresco, when you're going up in a retail situation against a Planet 13, if you don't have amazing e-commerce and perfect loyalty and texting and the ability to dive into your data and make educated decisions based on your analytics, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So I think that in that aspect, those lower guys are looking at them and saying, how do I do what they're doing so that I can go create my own empire?
Yeah, for sure. Michaela, I'd like to kind of bring you into this conversation too, because Springbig's at an interesting intersection where the CRM and loyalty part of the software is I would think a must-have as people are opening their doors. And then the extension of text messaging and email and everything else that the platform does is a different functionality. It's not a necessary, it's not a, we have to have this or we cannot function. Obviously, it's become an industry standard because text messaging is one of the easiest forms of communication. But I'd love to understand really the customer evolution that we've been going through. And yes, I do know that between you and I, but for the education of the audience, the evolution of what our customers have been going through and who within our ecosystem is setting those trends.
Yeah, I would say that what's unique about Springbig is that most of our roadmap in terms of features we're building, new cool stuff, or improvements to what we have today is primarily driven by feedback from our customers. So as we've seen the enterprise kind of multi-state operator grow and evolve, like what I would have considered a multi-state operator 3 years ago, or what Ivy would have seen a multi-state operator be 5 years ago, I think is so different today, as we've seen so much M&A in markets like Arizona that, recently went rec. So I believe that we at Springbig especially really benefit from taking the suggestions of enterprise level retailers that are on our platform. Their needs are typically the most complex with other systems that they're using and custom integrations, but we take a page out of that playbook and say, okay, this is where the industry is headed. We're following that lead. And what's nice is that those great ideas that come from the enterprise level operators at Springbig are available to every single retailer using it. So if they have a great idea that's going to help their operations, the mom and pop shop in Oregon or Oklahoma is going to benefit from that insight. And that's something I really love about the technology space in cannabis right now, is that really everyone is benefiting from the technology getting better because the most sophisticated operators are asking for those changes or advancements to the software they're using.
No, I think that's a great story. And like you said, it's very much a co-opetition on our part. Ivy, I'd like to bring you into that question as well, too, is just who's setting the trends and, where the conversations are happening with you. I know me as a cannabis consumer, I'm very big on going to Jane to look to see what I want, because I can look at multiple stores and it is a marketplace for me. Whereas if and we don't have that many freaking dispensaries in the state of Florida. We've got, 22 licenses and maybe 16 of are operating. So it's not that hard for me to comparison shop, but Jane just makes it so much easier because it's in a single pane of glass. I can only imagine the people that are having the conversation with you is, why should we be part of your marketplace and we can just do it ourselves and blah, 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 blah. I'm really interested to hear, some of the conversations you've had and how you've evolved, because you guys really have created this marketplace that is also, a logistics company.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. And so great to hear that you've used Jane in the past personally. And like Michaela said, that really does determine our product roadmap. Our customers and the feedback that we get from our customers is what makes Jane better. We do have our iHeartJane.com marketplace, but really our number one focus is on our white label experience. So Jane disappearing and allowing the different dispensaries and brands to have full control over their online presence and their online brand. And I think in terms of kind of what Michaela said before about MSOs being so great to get ideas from, I mean, these are the people that are pressure testing our systems day in and day out. So they're the ones that are really important to listen to. Their feedback isn't more important than a small mom and pop, but usually they're the ones to discover the new requests and the new features that we need. Because if we have people doing over 1,000 online orders on average per day, just through Jane. So we need to be able to handle that volume, and they need a system that is seamless, talks to all of their other systems, talks to Cova, talks to Springbig, you name it. So that's kind of what we're focused on, is obviously getting that kind of feedback from our customers. And it's usually the MSOs that are pushing it to the limits at all times. So that really also helps determine our product roadmap.
Very cool.
I'd like to touch on that too, Todd. I mean, I agree completely with what Michaela and Ivy just said, where I really want to take care of my enterprise clients, and I can't build every feature. An intelligent software doesn't say, okay, yeah, give me all of your ideas and we'll build this, and this. I think that's how you get built up tech debt and get into issues of having to go back and, oh man, where did we screw up at? But you definitely do see a trend of the enterprise clients being the ones that need the more sophisticated tools. So, but just because I work well with a 50 store operator, I care every bit as much about the one store operator. And in fact, I want to help him scale. And so sharing those new tools and showing him and being that really consultative partner to say, hey, look, if you have Springbig and Jane and Cova all working together, this is how I take you from one store to 5 by setting good processes in place. And that comes from those enterprise clients who've set the example.
And just
we've learned too. Oh, sorry, Ivy, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say too, thanks, Michaela, that the other thing I'd want to kind of focus on too is that, money doesn't always mean sophistication. Really, it's the people that are well organized and looking at their data and who their customers are and finding ways to retarget them. That's the most sophisticated company in the space, time in and time out. So being well funded obviously gives you a leg up, and people assume that they're going to be sophisticated, but that doesn't always translate to being better than maybe a mom and pop who actually knows their customers and are using their data to their advantage.
Great point.
Very cool.
I totally agree, Ivy. And I was just going to add that I think it's, speaking directly about multi-state operators or enterprise level organizations, with the 4 of us, the 4 of our companies on this call, I think if there's one thing that unanimously we would all agree on is that the enterprise operators, the smartest operators, are looking for the best system for each part of the organization that they need. So I think the enterprise operators realized a long time ago that all-in-one solutions that want to be the point of sale, the texting, the e-commerce, the data piece, something has to give eventually in an industry like cannabis, where if we're all being transparent, we are all new. I mean, 3, 5, 6, 7 years, that's not a long time for any of us. So I think that if there's one thing that we've seen that enterprise retailers have spotted years ago, is that best in class for each solution they're looking for is really the path to success when picking technology vendors. So I think that would be some important context to add as well.
Such a great
I would
point. Oh, I'm sorry, Todd.
No, it's good because I'm going to transition. So you finish.
I was going to say it's such a great point, Michaela, that you make. I think would you see all the moves happening in our industry lately, whereas there's a lot of consolidation, not only on the operator side, but also on the technology side. And when you build systems in place like what we're doing with Headset, Springbig, Jane, and we're all talking to each other, open Slack channels, direct communication. If there's a problem, we're handling it head on. If there's development that needs to be done, we're able to talk about that as a team. But then we can go to our separate corners, and Jane can do their great work on the e-com side, and Springbig on the loyalty and the CRM and texting side, and Headset on data, and us on POS, and you don't have Bob in a back room trying to figure out how to develop for all of those verticals. And that's really where the power lies. And I that there was an easier way to really relay that to the younger operators, that just because it's one bill and that bill may be a little bit lower does not mean that you're getting the best in class service like Michaela mentioned.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So before I was with Springbig, I worked for what in the traditional industry would be called a systems integrator, right? And we were trying to do that in the cannabis space. And I remember a lot of the people that I spoke to, it was crazy to me because they would essentially want to build their own proprietary software for something along their supply chain. And I remember every time I heard that, not even being an expert in cannabis software, I would just be like, oh, why do you want to do that? And I'd tell them, I go, are you going to build it and also sell it? They're like, no, we're just going to build it for us. Well, I'm like, well, that's dumb. And if you are going to build it and sell it, then you need to start a whole nother organization. But if you're going to build it and the guy who designs your system dies, God forbid, like, what are you going to do with updates and patches and integrations and everything else? Okay, it was a company. What if they go out of business, right? And they're a company that had popped up to support the cannabis industry, so they're brand new. Oh yeah, let's put all our eggs in that basket. So when I listen to you all talk, and the way that you talk and how we work together and how we are listening to our clients' feedback, I feel like that's actually happening, right? And bear with me when I say this, is together as a team, as individual companies, we are developing the best in breed solutions for the cannabis industry together through our integrations and through our cooperation, right? So all these companies that come in, they look around, they get overwhelmed and they say, I'm going to build it myself. Like, yo, we're doing that for you. We're just doing it together. We're not one single company, but we will work together. And I think that's a really cool way to look at this. And I think a lot of people are benefiting from it. You all are much more experienced at this than I am, but I'd be curious to hear, your war stories on this note about people looking to build their own thing. Because when we look outside of cannabis, no one else is doing this, right? Nobody else is going 1000% Microsoft, 1000% Apple, right? People use Slack, they use QuickBooks, they use SAP and Oracle, right? There's all different kinds of systems that we integrate in together. I mean, shit, I work for a company that $150 million a year in revenue, and all we did was integrate systems. So, to my point, I feel like we're out there, and I'm going to take this. I feel like we're talking to people that are crazy, that are just reinventing the wheel because they're in cannabis. And now none of our clients are actually crazy, but you guys get what I'm saying. Do you see this trend going where you have to say like, hey man, hey woman, listen, this just because it's cannabis doesn't mean we're going to do anything different that we do if we were an accounting firm or anything else. Yes, we have regulations and we have to make sure that the archive and everything else is in place, but hey, we're working together. We're working together like Microsoft does with SAP and Oracle and the other companies. Do you have a lot of those conversations, and how has that changed again over the past 1, 2, 3 years?
I can jump in or Joel, go for it.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, we a lot of times hear that a lot of, hey, we're going to make our own online ordering system. because it seems really simple, right? There's Shopify, it's a menu. How hard could this be? But cannabis is unique that there isn't a UPC for cannabis. Each individual SKU is so unique. Plus, the Blue Dream from Ivy's grow might be totally different than the Blue Dream from Michaela or Jewel or Ryan's grow. So each individual product, each strain by each brand, it's its own unique beast. And then add test results to that. There's just so much variance. So when we hear from people that say they want to build out their own solution, we usually say, okay, completely hear you, but then give it a couple months and we end up talking to them again, because having that level of complexity of each unique product, the integrations with not only their online menu, but then all of their other systems with their POS, loyalty, standardization of data. Most people, once they really kind of start pulling it back and understanding the work that goes into it, they reconsider.
Do you all ever have to have the
definitely.
Oh, Ivy, go ahead. Oh, she froze.
I was going to say, at Headset, we definitely hear a lot of people saying, I've got to connect data out of my point of sale, so I'm good. I got it. When we were like, well, do you have 5 analysts ready to do all of that work? That usually kind of gets people to pause a little bit. But what I like to encourage when we're working with someone new is like, just try to solve the problems one at a time. I think a lot of times the reason people look for this all-in-one solution at the beginning is because they're just overwhelmed with the number of questions that they're trying to answer. So I try to get them to say, like, what's the most important thing right now? Like, is it just like grow your customer base? Okay, what are the marketing tools we can invest in right now? Let's just focus there. Like, forget about inventory for a second, forget about employee management for a second. Like, let's just focus on that one problem. And that's kind of the beauty of being able to get different pieces of best-in-class software at different times, because you can wait until you're ready to start tackling that problem. Because if you're a small company of only, 5 to 10 people and you're trying to integrate all of this stuff all at the same time, it's just going to be chaos. So trying to get your organization to focus around one problem and like, let's bring in the tools we need to solve that problem. And you'll be really focused on that. It'll be easier to figure out what tools you need.
Is there ever a time where you need to have a conversation, or where it behooves you to have the conversation where it's like, okay, you plan on building this on your own. Okay, what else are you going to use for the rest of the supply chain? Okay, how do you plan on integrating? So you're going to reach out and you're going to integrate, and you're going to project manage all this, and you're going to make sure all of it happens. Ryan, Michaela, Ivy, Jules, whatever, just, hey, listen, you're going to use us for this. And because we integrate with SpringBig, and because we integrate with Kova and Headset and Jane, this is going to be a lot easier for you. And you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, I'm going to spearhead this for you. I'm going to reach out to them and I'm going to get them on the phone with you, and we're going to make this happen for you. Because I imagine that is a lot more of a powerful conversation to get them to view you as like, hey, I'm not trying to tell you to pick me over your own software or this single stack technology. I'm telling you to pick whoever the best is for each part of the supply chain, and we work with them and we'll make sure it's integrating. I'd love to hear, how those conversations have gone for you, and if this is something that you're actually discussing.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had these conversations. It's less likely that they're going to try to build a point of sale. I've had some that come from other retail operations that think that, oh, this should be easy, and they don't think about the compliance piece that's always sitting in the background. So there's definitely people that will think that they're going to do that. I spend a lot of my time coaching people away from building custom e-com stuff, like, trying to say, hey, look, I've seen it fall on its face so many times. There's so many moving pieces involved with it that why not just go with who's going to take care of you and give you the ultimate. Like, I get the customization. I get that you want it to be shiny and different looking and that you want to differentiate yourself from the customer. But at the end of the day, the main thing that is ruling it is functionality. And if it doesn't work, then the shiny, pretty thing that doesn't work loses business for you. So I try to take a point of just using my experience in the industry as a teaching tool and not try to be egotistical about it. Like, hey, you have to do this, or back somebody in the corner like what the all-in-ones are doing, but just try to say, hey, look, in my experience, here's what I've run across and here's what the results have been. And I think that if you allow me to, I can work with our partners to create a better situation for you.
Very cool.
I would
Yeah,
add there too that I feel really fortunate that I have had a lot of conversations with a lot of retailers and a lot of brands. And one thing I'm passionate about is ensuring that this industry is successful. And if I have an opportunity to talk to a retailer that I feel like could be making a mistake that is not in the best interest of their business being successful, Spring Big aside, sure, I'd love to be able to work with them, but I feel it's a responsibility to at least share the knowledge that I have. And from my side, in our sector of the ancillary service technology, I have not had one person be successful in trying to build texting or loyalty themselves with integrations. And sometimes I have to care about people enough to say the uncomfortable thing, right? It's not always easy to say, hey, Mr. Mrs. Dispensary owner, I don't think that's the right call for your business, but I think in 3, 6, 9 months, you'll thank me for saying that something that might be a little bit uncomfortable today. And I'm not saying it has to be Spring Big. I think, with any of these verticals, there's experts that have committed to being the best at what they do for the ever-changing needs of this industry. Take them up on it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to say, check your ego at the door, right?
Such a great point. And you really, and I'll just add one thing. You just said it, like, I try to help my salesmen teach in that way too, where it's like, look, use your experience to help them have a better one, to help them not make a bad decision. So it's not coming from a place of ego. It's coming from a place of, I want to be in service to you. And I know if you allow me to do that, I can truly help you.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I mean, really, if these single solutions, if we're really offering the best in class to everyone, then it should feel like one solution. So we should be able to provide as many options as possible, and they shouldn't feel like they have golden handcuffs on them to have to go with any of our companies. Everyone should be able to choose what's best and right for them.
Very cool. I want to go off on a quick tangent here and ask you as a personal question, because I remember when this happened to me, and it's really interesting. A lot of the conversations you just had is about caring for people in their business and making sure that they can benefit from your experience. We're in a very nascent, very new industry. And if you've been here 2 years, you're a grizzly veteran, right? I know other people who are on this meeting might argue that point with me, but was it ever weird to you, because you guys are all leaders in your business, when you were in a room with an MSO or just a very successful dispensary or brand, and you were just telling them tactics and best practices and everything else, where you're like, holy shit, I know a lot about cannabis. Like, I am directing one of the largest cannabis companies in the country on how they should handle their marketing or their data analytics or their back-end software. Like, just a quick tangent. I'd love to understand, like, the moment that you guys had that oh shit moment where you realize that you talk to a lot of people that are very smart and they all need help with the same thing. And you're probably one of the best in the industry at doing the thing that you're good at. I'd really just love to hear some personal experience.
Jewel, you're already muted. You want to go?
I'm the only one who feels that way, apparently.
No. I mean, I'll share. I've had 20 or 30 of those moments. I think, Missouri is one of those moments for me where I'm happy and proud to have sold like 60 some odd % of that market. And I grew up in Kansas, and I helped a lot of these guys figure out what their store flow is going to be, introducing people like Jane and Spring Big and helping guide the tech stack. And we sold our first the first cannabis in Missouri was sold in a Cova store, the first concentrates, the first edibles. And so for me, that's like, it just was like a wow moment. But I'd say the big one was when I was in a cookie store helping them open a location, and they're like coming to me to direct the entire retail team. And it's like, man, I'm standing in one of the biggest cannabis brands on the planet and I'm giving them knowledge. And I'm like, this is just unbelievably cool right now. How did I get here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things about the industry that I feel, 99% of the time, everyone is so willing and eager to help. And I feel like I learned that so quickly. And that is something that I'm drawn to. I feel like I'm a just helper by nature. And so I've always looked for opportunities because yes, as passionate I am about Spring Big, I'm passionate about this plant and access and these businesses having everything in their tool belt to thrive. And so for me, what comes to mind is like being in Florida, I work out of our headquarters in Boca, and there's not a ton of dispensaries in Florida yet, and our medical community is, really just starting to thrive. It's so new. And I realized that, hey, I was showing up on the doorstep of these opening days for some of the biggest publicly traded cannabis companies. And I was able to say, oh, wait a second, like, you shouldn't be having people do this way. Like, this is going to take way too long. Or, hey, did you make sure that you reached out to your PR company about getting some stuff in the newspaper? Like, the area that you're opening your store is a really, senior demographic. Make sure you're doing that so that people know. Did you know there's a 65 and over community? I just feel like I look for every opportunity, like some of the panelists have said, to be of service, and whether or not it has to do with them buying my technology. And I feel like I haven't worked in many other industries where everyone is just so willing to help, speak up, and make sure people have the information they need to do what they do best.
Sure. Ivy,
Yeah.
you guys want to add?
I think it's always, there's always surprises. Sometimes you'll get on the phone with someone that you've been intimidated by, at least I have personally, and thinking, oh my gosh, this is huge name. I'm really impressed right now. And then they get hung up on the color of a button and how it displays in one corner. And then you talk to someone who's in rural Arkansas and they're asking about their online conversion rate and how do they retarget abandoned carts. So it can be easy to be intimidated by those big names, but it doesn't always translate. Sometimes it very much translates, and they are coming out with the most innovative kind of questions and ideas and pushing us as a company as well. But it all goes back to that sophistication level. Having money doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be the market leader. It's the people that are also staying up on trends. I've talked to people that maybe worked in the industry. Like, it really doesn't matter your experience in the industry as much as it matters how up to date are you with today, and what's going on today. Talk to people that I used to work with at past companies, and they've been out of the industry for a year or two, and their lack of knowledge is really surprising because they're going off of kind of the industry 2 years ago, and it's not the same at all. So having a lot of cannabis industry experience doesn't really mean anything if you're not talking to people and talking to your customers right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate that. I know, a big part of this panel is to educate everybody on here, but I also like to inspire them, right? Just letting people know, like, if you put your head down, you work hard here, like, you will be a thought leader and an expert. And there is a lot of room for experts in this industry, right? We're all figuring it out together. As you see here on this call, we all work together. We have open lines of communication with each other. And I hope you guys get a little bit out of it, which is why I wanted to transition that way, getting back into the software stacks and working with brands and retailers. On that note, I want to kind of shift the conversation over to marketing, selfishly, because that's where I'm most involved in the industry. So, it's my turn to talk. No, I'm kidding. But candidly, because marketing is very, very interesting in the cannabis space for many reasons. One, because it's so restricted as far as what you can and can't do. I'm sure everybody who's watching this presentation understands at this point, you cannot pay to boost your social media posts. You can't do paid social. You can't do Google ads. A lot of the geo-targeting and other marketing solutions that are available to every other industry in the country are not available to cannabis. And certain channels that are available to cannabis are highly restrictive, right? So we have to get very outside the box when it comes to marketing. But it's really interesting as we have these conversations with clients, they're afraid to change. They found things they were allowed to do early on. They found a minimum amount of success with it. And they're afraid to test new waters because realistically in this industry, every dollar you have is so valuable. You have to make sure you stretch it. So although they see something that might sound too good to be true, they seem hesitant to really jump in with both feet to try it, right? And for example, we talk to brands that say, we sell every ounce of flower that we put on the shelf, so we don't have to market. Well, how long is that going to last for you, right? I had a conversation with somebody and I said, hey, are you selling flower because you're selling flower? Are you selling flower because everyone's selling flower? And that was a very interesting conversation, right? So I'm curious to hear, getting started, and we'll get into what the companies can do for everybody, just what you see with brands and retailers and where they're spending their money on marketing channels that we think can be improved. I still see a lot of people focusing on print media. I see a lot of people trying to focus on out of home. Bud tender education and engagement is probably one of the most popular ones in the industry, but it blows my mind to think that you're spending all this money on educating people that turn over very quickly and also have their own personal taste and on their own personal bias, and are, unless you have a physical incentive for them, are going to default to those, right? So I see a lot of channels being heavily spent on that just don't seem to make sense. So I'd really be interested to hear everybody else's view on how people are marketing and your thoughts on those channels.
I feel like in my experience talking to retailers and brands, the issue has really been data. The issue has been, I don't necessarily know that it didn't work, but I feel like it did work. And that's a slippery slope because, feelings aren't facts, and feeling like something worked doesn't mean that it actually did. So I love all of these technology companies providing cannabis operators the ability to have some data to pull back the curtain and say, okay, what is actually working and what is driving either people into my store to make purchases, or if you're a brand, what is actually moving units of my product in the stores so that I'm getting another PO. That really should be the litmus test. And my background is in marketing and advertising. And sometimes I joke that, like, when I was a marketer, if I would have gone to my boss and when he asked, okay, how'd we do on the $5,000 we spent on programmatic? If I would have said, I feel like we did great, I feel like I wouldn't have had a job after that. He was expecting hard data of either new customers or products that we had sold. So I feel like as brands and retailers start to really become empowered by data, and as more data becomes available that just hasn't been in our little nascent industry, I think that's when the tide is really going to start to turn. And I'm hopeful that as people start to know better, then we can all start to do better.
Yeah, I'd love to build off what Michaela was saying. I think she made some great points. I think one of the things that's interesting right now in this industry is so much of who has the contact information to do that direct marketing to the consumers, and then who has the data of what happens. It's the retailers, and they can really kind of gatekeep that information away from the brands. Right now, there's not necessarily great ways for brands to see directly, like, at this store. Maybe it'll change the way they order with me, but they don't always get to see directly into those pieces of sales data. So we're at Headset, we're always trying to encourage this more of an open data sharing kind of, you know, world where you're really working together, because if the brands knew that information, they could do some of the marketing spend within that retailer, right? And that takes some of the ease off the retailer of having to do all of the marketing themselves. So that's one thing that I've really seen. Another is just that when you're looking at like who gets to do the communication. So like Springbig is a super great platform, but really like it's mainly like retailers are the bread and butter of who gets to take advantage of that platform, because they're who gets the phone numbers. So I think a lot of us are working right now, and I know like we're working directly with you guys right now to figure out like how do we connect those dots and get those brands directly to the customers, since all of these other channels aren't really available to them.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to a little bit. I'd like to use the opportunity to share some of what we found at Springbig that has helped us bring the retailers and the brands together to co-market. When we started getting requests from brands about 2 years ago, you know, how can we start texting and how can we start building loyalty? And our first instinct was, you know, build a list, brands start collecting phone numbers, and they don't have a lot of access to the end customer. And if they just collect phone numbers and send out texts, to your point, Jewel, there's not a whole lot of data on what happens once they're marketed to. So we realized that in this time in cannabis history, really the retailer, to your point, is owning most of that transactional data. And what we found from our system was that retailers were already texting about brands. So most retailers, when they send out a text message, are mentioning a specific product category or a specific brand that is on promo, new, whatever the reason is. So what we've done is we've actually said to brands, hey, we want to give you the ability to get to control that messaging. So we're actually connecting brands and retailers so that brands can say, hey, retailer that carries my product, I want to sponsor your text message so that my image that I think is going to be the best representation of my brand and my story is what's going to be seen by customers when you text about us. And then on the you know, kind of post-sale results, the retailer is shifting the cost of sending that message to the brand. So they want the brand to want to do it again. So they're willing to say, hey, brand, look how successful this was. You had 75 customers that had never purchased your product at our store buying it. So I feel like Springbig is really taking a step forward in finding a way to say, okay, we have 31 million cannabis consumers in our system who have raised their hand and said, I want to hear about cannabis deals and promotions. And so it actually has been so exciting to start to see brands say, whoa, like the lifetime value of one of my customers is X. I had no idea. And now when I say, hey, look, we got 63 more of those customers for you, they know exactly what that's going to mean for their business. And that's been really cool. So I'm looking even more forward to specifically Headset and Springbig working more closely together on that. I know we're working with Jane as they've rolled out their opportunities for brands to get some placement on menus. And so I feel like we all are in that next phase of kind of saying, okay, brands, you've been a little bit underserved.
Yeah, I think that's such a great example of just aligning incentives. And I think for us as technology leaders, like making sure that the retailers are comfortable and figuring out how do we align those incentives to just make this whole world more open. I think that's something that's really in our power to do, and something that I think things like this panel right now are doing a great job of helping move along.
100%. And I think, you know, it's all about bringing what's been done in store, what's worked in traditional markets, really bring that to cannabis, and also bringing it online and allowing customers or brands to actually take back their customers and take control of their data. And one thing that, like Michaela kind of touched on, that I've been working on is right now, the biggest way that cannabis companies, brands can market to their customers is really through the store experience of doing kind of that trade marketing, making sure that they're placed in a certain spot in the store, maybe a custom sign. So we're working at Jane on actually bringing that online. So more of like a digital trade marketing where brands can be the first thing that someone sees on their menu, and actually using personalization. So I see, maybe a vape pen, and maybe Michaela sees a flower and Jewel sees a cart, and so on and so on. So having that kind of in-store marketing being taken online really helps, because then you also get the data and all the benefits that come with that of what delights people and how can we retarget them and reach more of them at the same time.
Yeah, I think from my end, I'm creating the great in-store experience, but I have quite a bit to do with how the online experience ultimately looks as well. And I think that's one of the things that Cova does better than any of our competitors is pushing robust product details through a Jane to really, display or relay that message that their bud tender is giving in store to somebody who's shopping online. And I know that we're starting to really go and work with a lot of the cultivation and manufacturing brands out there just to create relationships, because they're now becoming great retail brands as well. So, I see things with being able to have a closed loop system where we're bringing the absolute best terminology that this manufacturer wants to be relaying their product and how they want it to be spoken about and how they want the customer to feel about it, closing that loop to where those great product details are in a system like Cova and ultimately getting pushed to their e-com and to their Jane sites, and creating this message that's strong in store or online. Other than that, I just pay real close attention to what Michaela and people like Headset are doing, and I try to make the best recommendations for the customers to follow their leaps and bounds in those technology spaces.
Ryan, I mean, what you do is at the heart of what we do, right? Without your system feeding into ours, we wouldn't be as successful as we are. So I imagine that's a huge advantage to Cova. I want to leave because we got about 8 minutes left and we're going to open up to Q&A. But the last topic I want to throw out there, and if anybody watches Elevate Your Grind, it tends to end on a forward-looking statement or topic. But I feel that when the industry was more nascent and early on, before a lot of us got into this part of it, as Michaela said, brands were underserved because retailers were so important at the time and they had so many needs, that there were a lot of programmatics and other ad networks that popped up that weren't what they said that they were, because they were getting random real estate on the internet and a bunch of other places. So they might have had X amount of impressions or people or anything else, but those weren't people that were physically walking into a store to go buy cannabis, right? The people on this panel and the companies that are participating in this call focused on retail and built a very large network of retailers that we work with to give us the ability to offer that real estate to brands. Obviously, I can speak for Spring Big the easiest, where we have 2,100 retailers, and Michaela can correct me if I'm wrong, that are working with us that make 31 million consumers that have raised their hand and said, hey, I want cannabis content sent to my phone. So if anybody else before us, and I apologize to all those companies, said I have 31 million customers that raised my hand and said I want cannabis content, well, where was that coming from, right? So because of that distrust, how do we get the trust back of the industry that it's like, no, these programmatic tools are here. These opted into networks are here. It just took us a little bit of time to build them the right way. And now we're opening them up to you. How do we convince folks that have been burned 1, 2, 3, 4 times that you trust us for data, you trust us for loyalty, you trust us for POS, you trust us for delivery and logistics, now trust us with your marketing too? What does that conversation look like? Or are people already opened up to it?
I think promoting a culture of openness, having a lot of APIs, working with other companies to show a robustness of platform is one way to really show like, well, okay, I have all of the data that you're going to get from my company. You can get out of my platform API You can put it in your own data lake if you want to, and that way you'll always have it forever, even if you don't trust that we're not going to be around anymore. But because we have these solid relationships with each other, like I think all 4 of our companies here have all worked together in some regard, I think that does create a network effect of like, oh, well, they're connected, they're in here. I think that leads to a lot more trust. And so the more that we can keep doing that and just building that culture of openness, I think the better.
I know for us at Spring Big, I'll jump in. Authenticity and transparency has always been the recipe for success. I tell my team all the time, like, we are so fortunate to have the luxury of being able to be so transparent and still be able to say yes to most things on most calls, because we really do have a great platform and a great product. So I think that's really where it starts. And I think the 3 companies on the call today, 4 companies rather, especially have the benefit of the data. I mean, I say at Spring Big, like, we have nothing to hide behind because we're pulling transactional data for you to see whether or not it worked. You can't argue with facts, right? And so I think helping encourage, I mean, the more brands that are seeing that and are starting to realize, oh, maybe I have been settling for a little bit less than ideal in terms of knowing my ROI or understanding the true impact of some of this stuff. I think that's really where we're going to see the kind of biggest shift. And also to that point, I think the more of us thought leaders that are sitting down together to talk about, it's not just Michaela from Spring Big seeing this, or it's not just Ivy from Jane, this is collectively what the technology ecosystem in cannabis is identifying. And I would find it really hard to believe that 4 industry leaders like Spring Big, Jane, Headset, and Kova all happen to be on the wrong track and we're all headed the same way. I think there'd be at least one person around that would be smart enough to say, hey, maybe this way or that way. So I think just knowing that, you know, the companies that really are powering the data and transactions and online orders of the industry are all looking for more data-driven options for our clients.
I love that. I think just showing through our successes and through the clients that we have helped and through those testimonials of that we've done those things and that we are here for our clients and that we can be trusted. But I think that something Michaela said it touched my heart, which is just building trust through doing the right things with your clients. You know what I mean? I had to learn in this industry that I couldn't sell like I could in other industries. I had to find a way to do something unique. And for me, that uniqueness was making a connection and making a friend and really letting somebody understand that I'm here to help. And it's not about my profit and it's not about my quota. It's about that I love this plant. I want to help enable you to help enable clients and patients to get the medicine that they need. And I think when you are in service to others, you treat people with kindness, you keep your word and you act on integrity, the profit and all the other things fall in line pretty easily. And so when you build those kinds of relationships, your customers are really open to coming to you as a partner and saying, hey, what should I do here? And you know, that's magical.
1000%. I think everyone here touched on it, but really the only way you can earn trust is by having a track record of success and excellent customer support. And then you have to earn that trust every single day. So you can't get complacent. Can't think, oh, we have all the top MSOs, we're good to go, because they're going to be evaluating you just as much as you might be trying to win new business elsewhere. So I think just having that track record, proving it out, and then of course looking at the data to be able to back it up and say, don't go off a gut feeling like Michaela was saying. If you were to make huge business decisions off that gut feeling, I think that person probably be fired, like she mentioned. So use the data and support your customers.
Very cool. Well, thank you everybody for joining today. I thought it was a great conversation. I enjoyed everyone's input. We lost about half the attendees in the past 5 minutes when I told them it would be the last topic. But if there is anybody who has questions, feel free to raise your hand, drop them into the Q&A, and this panel will certainly stick around for a few more minutes to answer them. Anybody from Spring Big, you're obligated. All right. Well, I think we answered everybody's questions. Clearly, nobody's entering into the Q&A. I do want to point out, Jewel, I see you're in a hotel sipping a Starbucks coffee, so you must be traveling again, and I'm highly jealous. So as a salesperson, I envy you.
Calling from a casino in Reno, baby.
Sounds
Casino in Reno. I just got back from Mississippi, so I agree with you, Todd. I was longing for the travel, so I'm definitely out there trying to do it again too.
very cool. Well, we have a question, and my camera just shut off. That's cool.
I see there's a question about text messaging restrictions. Coming June 1st, there's some really, really important changes to how cannabis content can be transmitted via text. So Nick, it depends a little bit on whether or not you're in the US or Canada. I'm going to drop my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out because I want to understand where you're located and whether or not you have an existing list, but I'd be happy to give you some helpful info. Essentially, just kind of short version of this, every single phone number transmitting messages through the carriers is going to have to be registered with the carrier to continue to be able to text. So all of Spring Big's phone numbers are fully registered, so completely 10 DLC compliant. If you have any other questions about specifics, like I said, I'll drop my email address in the chat, but the phone numbers have to be registered with the carrier, and really the content in the message has to be pretty clean. So I can chat with you about some of the cool ways that we're helping retailers continue to get the message out, brands too.
Michaela, thank you for picking up the slack when my camera just literally shut off on its own for some reason. All right, both questions were from Nick. Anybody else have any questions before we let these panelists go? Nope. All right. Well, panelists, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate your insights. Folks, this has been our panel for today. If you missed it, we're going to put a recording up on the Cannabis Lab website. I'm sure there'll be highlights in a lot of different places. So stay tuned for those. Of course, catch Elevate Your Grind on youtube.com/elevateyourgrind. And we're always live on LinkedIn and Facebook Live on Tuesdays and Wednesdays nights at 7 p.m. Other than that, folks, everybody have a great day. I don't know. Are we bringing Amanda back to shut this down? Do you have any more announcements, Amanda? Making it awkward for me? All right, we're not bringing Amanda back. Everybody, thank you for tuning in and have a great night.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.